Okay, I'd like to welcome Mr. Jasper Shealy, a veteran, Vietnam Air veteran, and I'd like to show our appreciation for letting us speak with you about your experience. My name is Paul Julian. I'm here with my coworker Joe Davey. It is February 22nd, and it's about 10 minutes after 1 p.m. And we're doing the interview in a Veterans Memorial Center in Brevard County, and the city is Merritt Island. Jake, where were you born?
I was born in Montgomery, Alabama.
Okay. And who, your parents, what did they do?
Well, my father worked with IBM, but not as an IBM employee. His specialty was the installation of IBM equipment for generally keeping track of payroll and keeping track of supplies and that sort of thing, especially during World War II.
Okay. And did your mother, Jake, work, or was she at home?
My mother was a very talented person, piano, spoke French, excellent cook and so forth. But you know, the plight of women in her era, there were a lot of restrictions.
Okay.
So she generally wound up either doing artistic work or secretarial work.
Okay. Limited just by the times as they
Yes.
were. Yeah, okay. Then, as far as, did you have any brothers and sisters?
I have a younger brother and an older sister.
Okay. And did they serve in the military?
My brother did, yes.
Okay. Around the same time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
And-
we're not quite 3 years apart.
Okay.
So he was in the Army, I was in the Air Force.
And he's your,
Younger brother.
and so did he went in the Air Force or?
No, he was in the Army.
Army, I'm sorry. And
Yeah.
did he kind of follow anything close to what you did, Jake?
Well, we were academically 4 years apart. So he came in 4 years after I did. So we overlapped a little bit, but not much.
Not much.
He wound up in Berlin doing Army Intelligence Service, then was shipped over to Vietnam, and he didn't see combat.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure exactly what he did, to tell
Okay.
the truth. He's told me, but you know, it's still kind of obscure.
Okay. Now, after describing your brother, your older sister, did she have, did her and your parents have any particular feelings about you joining the service?
No, not that I recall. No.
Okay. Sorry about that. What were the primary and secondary schools that you know, your primary and secondary schools, like did you let's just go to college. Did you go to college before you went in?
Yes.
And at that time, Jake, did you get your civil engineering, is it, or industrial engineering?
Industrial. No, I went to Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech's a land grant school. So it's at that time it was mandatory for all able-bodied males to do basic ROTC. So I did basic ROTC, and I did Air Force ROTC, and the professor of air science encouraged me to go into advanced ROTC. And I had initially said, well, I think I would, but then that summer I was a co-op student, and I was working with the American Oil Company in Texas City, Texas as a junior chemical engineer, because I was a chemical engineering major at that point. And in the chit chat of the office and so forth, I said it was going to go into advanced ROTC. And everybody around me said, "Oh, no, don't do that. Worst possible thing you could do. Don't do it." So when I got back in the fall, I told the professor of air science, "Sorry, no, I've decided I'm not going to." And about 6 or 8 months later, I got a draft notice. And I didn't really connect those two events for a while, and I'm just guessing that there was a connection. Anyhow, I had to get draft deferments for the balance of my undergraduate career. And when I graduated, in the meantime, I had switched majors to what today you'd call human factors engineering, man-machine systems, how to design things so that ordinary people can operate it safely and efficiently, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so now it's graduation time, and if you couldn't get what was declared a defense essential job at that point, you were eligible to be drafted. Mm-hmm. And since I'd already gotten my draft notices and I had been getting student deferments, it was either get a defense essential job or get drafted. And that was right at the buildup of Vietnam, right when they were starting to draft people and send them to Vietnam. And that's just about the last place I wanted to go. So I started scouting around, what are my opportunities? And so I didn't bother talking to the Army. I didn't bother talking to Marines. So I went to the Navy. And the Navy says, well, you're going to graduate from Georgia Tech. Yes, you could be an officer. Well, what would I be doing? My job, what I want to do is human factors engineering. Well, we don't have human factors. Well, what would I be? Well, you'd probably be a supply officer. And you'd be on land for 6 months. You'd be on water for 6 months. Mm-hmm. And you'd do that for the next 4 years. That didn't sound that exciting to me, so I went to see the Air Force. By then I decided, the Air Force is why I'm scrounging around. But I go to see the Air Force, and there's an Air Force recruiting office right there on Peachtree Street in Atlanta. And I no sooner got to the door than this sergeant opens the door, offers me a cup of coffee, offers me a cigarette, says, how can I help you? And I said, well, yeah. And so it comes out, yes, I'm about to. Oh, good. And what's your field? I said, human factors engineering. He said, is that what you want to do? I said, yes. Well, lots of people have human factors. We do lots of human factor stuff in the Air Force. So he had me hooked, and I sort of thought I heard, and you could too, but I don't think he said that. So anyhow, I started to sign up, and
he qualified by could.
Yeah. Yeah, and so he's got the hook in me. He starts reeling me in. Now he says, it's competitive. You'll have to take this test, this AFOQT, Air Force Officer Qualification Test. But he says, you look like a bright kid. I think you can do it. Well, okay. So I took it. I got it. And a couple of weeks later, I get a congratulations. You're going to be in Class 63A, and your AFSC is going to be 8121. AFSC is Air Force Specialty Code. 8121, but it doesn't say what 8121 is. So I go back to the recruiter, and he remembers me. He opens the door, offers me a coffee and a cigarette. And I said, well, how'd it go? I said, well, I got excited. He said, great, fantastic. I knew you could. And I says, well, how can I help you? I said, well, this 8121, what is 8121? That's human factors, right? Or no. I said, 81. He said, well, you wanted human factors, right? I says, yeah. Well, that's probably what it is. Well, let me look. So he walks over this bookcase, and here's this 3-ring binder that is, a hand-width wide, pulls it down, puts it down, and it's all of the AFSCs. Well, instead of going all the way to 8,000, he starts at 0000. And we finally get to 8,000. We get to 8,100. 8,100. Oh, Air Police. And so 8121 is Air Police Officer Trainee. And I'm, what? And he says, I don't understand. He says, you wanted human factors. I said, yes, I did. Well, you know what? I'm sure it's an administrative mistake. When you get to Lackland, just point this out, and they'll take care of it.
Kicking it.
So I'm naive as can be. Okay, sure. I think I had sucker written across my forehead. So fast forward, okay, I drive out to Lackland, and now it's the induction process, and they put you in a 100-person flight or squadron, I think it was flight, and so we're in 4 rows of 25 each, and you're organized by height, and I was the tallest person there, so I was the first person. Okay, so you go in at what they call the Green Monster, which was an old aircraft hangar that they had converted to a massive open office with desk after desk after desk, and you just go in and just peel off and you just take the next one. So we've got this clerk typist asking, and we get to the question, AFSC. I said, well, there's a problem here. And she doesn't say anything, she just raises her hand. This NCO comes along, what's the problem? She says, AFSC, says, let me see your orders. 8121, start to, well, wait a minute. And he turns around and he says, what's the problem? I said, well, I'm not supposed to be 8120. He says, yes, you are. But tell you what, when you get to your squadron, talk to your training officer. He'll explain it all to you. And I'm sitting there baffled. What the hell is going on here? In the meantime, they've taken my clothes, they've taken my hair, and they've given me these ill-fitting fatigues. So we get to the squadron, and here is Captain Cortez. Captain Cortez is the first honest person I met in the Air Force. And he this is 1963. He's just finishing up his 20 years. He was in World War II in the Navy as a tail gunner and became a warrant officer. And then when the demobilization took place in 1947, he was given an option. He could leave or he could join the Air Force. So he joined the Air Force, and now he was just finishing up his 20 years. So, and he was ready to go. And so he had no dog in the fight, shall we say. And so he says, well, let me tell you, you're in the Air Force now, son, and 8121 is Air Police Officer, and that's going to be your designated duty. But the good news is it's a DDA, Directed Duty Assignment, and so it's only 18 months in duration. So after 18 months, you can request to be reassigned to something else, like Air Police or Human Factors. So, okay, I can, 18 months, I can do that. And I have a real problem telling right from left. To me, it's cognitive. I have to think right. So when you're drilling, you have to instantly, by the right flank, march. Which is that? So I flunked marching. Yeah. All right, and OTS.
I wasn't that great either.
No, well, it's non-credit. Yeah. And so at the end, if your academic score is above a certain level, they're supposed to give you a regular commission as opposed to a reserve commission. Well, I scored sufficiently high, and so I was told this later by Captain Cortez. There's this big discussion the night before graduation. What are we going to do with Cadet Shealy? He's bright enough, but he flunked marching. As if that's how in the Air Force you got somewhere. So the compromise was, well, we'll give him a reserve commission. So that's how I wound up being a reserve officer. Okay. So now you graduate, where would you like to go? Well, gee, I'd like to go to the Northeast. So they sent me to Hancock Field in Syracuse, which, wow, this is all only up and up, Syracuse is in the Northeast. So I was becoming a believer. And so I'm sitting at the officers' club shortly after I got there having a beer, and Lieutenant Clark is sitting next to me. He's the base human resources person.
Which is related to human factors.
Well, no, it's base personnel.
Okay.
And we're chit-chatting, and somehow we get off on I'm only going to be here 18 months, then I'm going off into human factors. He said, well, what makes you think so? And I said, well, because that's what I'm going to apply to. He says, well, do you know the difference between critical and non-critical career fields? I said, no, I've never heard that concept before. He says, well, real simple. A critical career field is one where we don't have enough people. Non-critical is where we have more people than we have slots. And I want to tell you, air police is critical. So your chances of transferring from that to human factors, which is non-critical, are 0.
Wow.
Oh.
Wow.
But there's something called AFIT, Air Force Institute of Technology, that if you apply for AFIT and get a graduate degree by an act of Congress, they have to assign you to a position that is commensurate with whatever training you got. Okay, so I applied for AFIT and I was accepted. So now I'm happy. I've got orders that says cannot be reassigned. You know, my next duty station was going to be George Washington University to get a master's degree. Good, good, good. All right. So in the meantime, I meet a nice young lady and we get engaged, and so we were going to get married in August before going to graduate school in September of 1967. March 29th of 1967, I'm off skiing with Lucy, and we come back to her house in Watertown, and this urgent call for me to call the base. Well, as chief of security and law enforcement there, I'm accustomed to getting these calls because who knows, there was an accident, there was a break-in, some airman beat up his wife, you know, this, that, and the other. So I called, and it's Lieutenant Clark, and he says, pack your bags. I said, what? He says, you're going to Vietnam. I said, no, I'm not. I've got orders. He says, can I be reassigned? He says, did you read the fine print? I said, what fine print? And you always carry a copy of your orders with you, so I pull it out and open it up. And right where it says, can I be reassigned, asterisk, down at the bottom, except in the case of a national emergency, which was the Gulf of Tonkin. So, March the 29th, I'm to report in April the 10th, 12 days later. So, Lucy and I said, well, what are we going to do? Should we get married? Should we not? Back and forth. Let's get married. So we decided to get married. So, and I got a 30-day delay, and instead of going to Vietnam April the 10th, I got married April the 10th. So now I've wound up reporting in May the 11th, 1966. In the meantime, between those two dates, the base was partially overrun in Pleiku. And the reason, one of the reasons why it was partially overrun, there was no perimeter fence. So I show up as a first lieutenant, and my job is to be in charge of the security of the base. Now, I have never received any training whatsoever in air police work. Well, no, I take that back. I did take a basic course in air police officer administration, you know, how to sign papers. But in terms of base defense concepts, nothing, you know. And so I show up, and I'm supposed to be in charge of it. Well, in the meantime, the base has been partially overrun. And the base commander looks at my orders, and right in there it says, you know, graduate of Georgia Tech. He says, oh, you're an engineer. Build me a fence. And I said, but I'm not that kind of an engineer. He says, son, build me a fence. And so all of the plans were there, the concrete posts were there, the barbed wire was there, you know, everything to build the fence. So that was my assignment for the next roughly 3 months, that with my guys and about 100 Vietnamese, we actually built 10 kilometers of perimeter fence and whatnot.
So, if I could just interrupt.
Sure.
Jake, so that 3 months, was it intensive?
Yeah, well, it was 7 days a week, 14, 15, 16, to day up, sun up to sundown. Yeah.
That's intense.
Yeah. So we built the fence. Yeah.
And so what you've told me up to this point is kind of like you were following the process, and it really ended up, what I hear a lot, is it being the needs of the service. In other words, it trumps everything else.
Yeah.
And even when it gets down to your specific tasks, it's you know, you didn't have skills and you didn't have experience, but yeah, so.
No, well, I'm coming from the South. There's a kind of I think Southerners have a sense of duty and military, and And I felt I was serving my country, and after all, I did volunteer to join. So you do what you're told to do. And that's why I was doing what I was doing. The other thing, when I got the orders to go, I knew very little about Vietnam. Vietnam was just becoming somewhat controversial at that point. So I decided to read up on what can I read up on Vietnam. And I stumbled on this book by a French journalist, Bernard Fall. The title of the book was Street Without Joy. And he describes what the French were encountering during the French Indochina War, right up through Dien Bien Phu and whatnot. And Street Without Joy, the street he's talking about is the highway that runs from Hanoi to Saigon, or as they call it now, Ho Chi Minh City. But it's kind of, I went back there about 2 years ago, and the call sign for the airport is SGN, as in Saigon. Not Ho Chi Minh City, so,
Did just a little aside,
Yeah.
Jake? What is what was your really main impressions when you went back?
Well, one of them, amazing deja vu, because we landed at Tan Son Nhut. And they still call it Tan Son Nhut. And as we're taxiing up to the airport proper, we go right by base ops. The old base ops, same base ops that I was used to, and it's just like it was, except
Amazing.
it's got a little barbed wire around it.
Amazing.
And then on either side of it are the revetments, where we used to have F4s, only now there are MiGs there. And you just send the, well, geez, isn't that weird? It's really strange. And then you taxi a little bit further, and all of a sudden you come to this enormous, one of the biggest airports. I mean, it's a huge, major airport, and it's brand new.
Would it be comparable to something in America?
Oh, better. I mean, I got to tell you, we're fast becoming a third world country with regard to our infrastructure compared to the rest of the world. It's pathetic. It really is. So yeah, it was kind of, imagine that.
And then Jake, relating to, did you the reason you went is just curiosity, or did you go back to? Is this something that you needed to do, huh?
Well, my granddaughter and her boyfriend, her fiance, invited me to go because they were going to go, and I have a very nice relationship with her, and because we had previously, we'd been to China, to Tibet, Taiwan,
Asia, other places.
and all over the Far East.
Did it, given that all the you'd been through, and the sacrifice you made, and did it help at all, or no? As far as did it give you a different perspective on Vietnam, the people of Vietnam, on America? Did it?
Yeah, it really did. We're getting a little ahead of the story if you want to do it in a chronological sequence, but
Okay.
After we completed the perimeter fence, and I was authorized 450 men to defend the base. I rarely ever had more than about 250, and because of the buildup, we started getting people with less than no experience at all. We started getting replacements that had not even really completed basic training. Basic training the last couple of weeks are weapons proficiency training. So I was getting people that didn't have any weapons, they didn't know how to shoot a gun, and we're supposed to defend the base with these guys. So I had to build a firing range to train these people, and in the midst of all this, the Air Force ran out of ammunition. We were using some sort of an antiquated, well, I guess it was new then, but by today's standards, antiquated computer-based supply system, and there were all sorts of hiccups. And so we got this order from 7th Air Force Headquarters in Saigon to cease proficiency training. Now, proficiency training presumes that you have already qualified on a weapon. I'm getting people that have not qualified on the weapon. So we're running out of ammunition. So I'm thinking, well, what the hell? I have friends in the meantime in the MPs, the military police, 4 miles away over at Camp Holloway, an Army base. And so I went over there to see if I could get some ammunition. And they said, well, what do you have? I said, what do you mean, what do you have? Well, he said, well, you don't just expect us to give you ammunition. I said, well, yeah. No, that's not how it works. And so I look around, and I go back to the base, to Pleiku, to base supply, to see what have we got in base supply. And there are like 1,500 U.S. Air Force personnel on base at that point. And for some reason, there were 5,000 beds, springs, and mattresses in supply. And nobody knew why they were there. So I go over and I discover a luxury at Camp Holloway was a canvas cot. Some people were just sleeping on the ground. So a bed. So the next thing, and we didn't even have Jeeps. We had International Harvester Scouts. And I don't know why people are so fond of International Harvester Scouts. Those things are awful. They have this hideously big turning radius, and they're so high they'll roll over in a heartbeat. You know. But anyhow, that's what we were given. So I put a bed on my International Harvester Scout, and I go over to the motor pool at Camp Holloway, and I trade this bed, spring, and mattress for a deuce and a half. Because the supply system in the Army was that if it didn't have tracks, if it didn't fly, and it wasn't, a major piece of artillery, it's considered a combat loss once it leaves Oakland, California. Air Force was totally different. If we lost something as insignificant as, let's say, a .38 revolver, it was a really big deal. So we would have to keep the list of it. And the next time we lost an airplane somewhere, then we would say, on that airplane, by the way, there was this .38 revolver, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And sometimes if you added up the weight, the stuff that was on there was equal to the weight of the airplane. But everybody understood. It was a wink and a nod kind of thing. So anyhow.
It's part of the, real quick, Jake, it's part of the military culture. That's just the way it was.
Well, it's how you survive.
Yeah.
I mean, if you follow the rules, damn it, you'll get killed.
Yeah.
No two ways about it. So anyhow, that was the start of what I called my Beds for Bullets program. And trading, and so part of the insanity, and if I ever write this up, I'm going to call my whole episode in the military Cosmic Insanity. Because that's just what it is. I mean, everything you ever read in Catch-22 or MASH, it's all true. We've just changed the names. No doubt about it. And I suspect it's been that way from time immemorial. Probably the Roman legionnaires were doing the same thing. So my Beds for Bullets coincides with my need now to defend the base. And at that point, the TA, the Table of Authorization for Air Police to defend the base, was handguns. You could have, as an officer, I had a .38 revolver. My enlisted men had a Colt 1911 pistol. They had an AR-15 or an M16. I had the small M1 carbine. And we were also authorized the M60 machine gun, which is fires the standard NATO round 7.62, and the M79 grenade launcher, and we could have flares too. Mm-hmm. And that was it. We may have, I don't remember whether we were allowed hand grenades or not. Maybe, maybe not. But that was it. And the Army was supposed to, the ARVN, it's all coming back from the Army of the Republic of Vietnam. They were supposed to defend the outside of the base. Well, I want to tell you, they were never anywhere to be seen.
Really?
Yeah. And we got what I called H&I, harassment and interdictment firing, every night. Somebody, somewhere around the perimeter, they'd be shooting at us. And I think there was just probing, to see how we would respond and so forth. But I became concerned that, you know, if anybody ever made a serious attempt on this base, what the hell am I going to do? You know?
When you're responsible.
And I was responsible, and well, my first responsibility was to myself. I want to survive this outfit. So, long as I can trade beds for bullets, I can trade beds for guns. Even though I'm not authorized it, I thought it would be nice to have, like a 50 caliber machine gun is a crew-served weapon. It takes more than one person to fire this thing. And the same with a mortar, an 81 millimeter mortar. It's called a base plate mortar. In fact, you've got one out here in your museum.
Yes.
And so
But that was those two weapons were not authorized.
No, I was not authorized that. I wasn't authorized Claymore mines. I wasn't authorized a 105 recoilless rifle. But I felt all of those would be nice to have. And so I had them. Now we can fast forward a couple of months, and then I decided also I needed to take a look at what the base looks like outside the perimeter. And there was something called a status of forces agreement that essentially said that as an Air Force personnel, if I went off base, I could only carry a weapon for defensive purposes. I couldn't go out in an offensive manner, which basically meant I couldn't go out and do a patrol on the outside of the base to see what the base looks like. And we had a base chopper, an HH something Cayman. So I had flown around and I could see, but I thought I really needed to see what it looks like on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So I would, about twice a month, I would take about 20 guys and we would load up and we would do a 10-click walk around the base. And that 10 clicks would take all day. Half the base was easy because the runway was dug out of a hillside, so we were just walking on dry land. But the other half, it was out into a bunch of rice paddies, bamboo thickets, and swamp.
And Jake, how long you said 10 kilometers?
10 kilometers.
That's the perimeter?
Yeah, 6.2 miles. It was a small base. It was the smallest Air Force base around. Yep. And so I was doing one of these, and when I got back one afternoon, covered head to toe with mud and these drainage canals that are used as sewers and so forth, so I'm just stinky. And I wanted nothing more than to take a shower and get a cold beer. And here's this lieutenant colonel from 7th Air Force headquarters, sitting at my desk with his feet up on my desk, wearing starch khakis. And he proceeds to give me the routine. Where have I been? You know, it's like I'd been to the beach for a picnic, you know. Where have I been? Well, I've been on a patrol. And where was this patrol? Around the base. Inside the base or outside the base? Outside the base. Well, are you authorized to do that? Are you aware of what does the status of forces agreement say about that? And so I violated the status of forces agreement. And also, while you were away, I did an inspection, and I discovered 50 caliber machine guns, 105 recoilless rifles, 81 millimeter mortars. Where did you get those things? I said, well, from the Army. Oh no, let's see. So are you authorized to have those? No, not really. Well, why do you have them? I said, defending the base, duh. I didn't say duh, but this is a god awfully dumb question. To defend the base. Well, where did you get them? From the Army. Did they just give them to you? I said, more or less. And so he starts probing, and so it comes out, yeah, I'm taking beds from the supply, I'm taking over to the Army Army's giving me guns and ammunition, and we're defending the base. So, well, isn't that misappropriation of government property? I said, I don't know, could be. And I'm thoroughly ticked at this point, and I had no aspirations to be a career officer, So I started getting snippy, and so next thing I'm accused of is insubordination. Lack of due respect to a superior officer.
This person just shows up.
Yeah, out of the blue. So we decide we should go see the base commander. So we go see Colonel Bonneau, William F. Bonneau, great guy. And I was at that point, I was a captain. And so I reported directly to him on a daily basis about the status of the security of the base and so forth. So he knew everything. you know, and he was glad that I was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting the job done.
Mm-hmm.
So this lieutenant colonel starts, you know, reading the riot act about what an awful person I am,
Mm-hmm.
and Colonel Bonneau says, stop right here. He says, you know, I know everything that Captain Shealy's done, and I highly approve of it. He says, you know, but for that, the base probably would have been overrun last January. So why don't you get back on your Silver Bird, which was a
Mm-hmm.
highly polished C-123
Mm-hmm.
Fairchild, go back to Saigon, go back to Tan Son Nhut, and see if you can get us some bullets, you know, so we can defend this base. By the way, you know, this is a combat zone up here. And so he left. And, you know, so it was,
Fantastic.
that was,
Finally got a person that had reason. That,
yeah,
yeah. And
Yeah.
that would support you, you know. I mean, up until that point, Jake, you'd never really had anybody like that there, you know.
well, he was a good guy. He was a good guy, yeah.
Did that have anything to do with your Silver Star?
Bronze Star.
Bronze Star?
Yeah, well, I think it did. All right, I got a Bronze Star. It was not a combat-related Bronze Star, but it's for meritorious service or something. But you know, and I really think there were several things. One was, okay, I built the perimeter fence, and I led the successful defense of the base in January. But I think equally, perhaps even more important, was the way in which I achieved the defense of the base through unofficial out-of-channels, which is the sort of thing you couldn't write up in the
In
commendation.
other words, Jake, you improvise, which is not
Yeah.
Air Force type. They don't.
No,
It's
well,
not
it was
written in there.
definitely not something you do stateside,
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so I think that's probably why I got the Bronze Star. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
but that's my guess.
So you just digressed. So in January, was it attacked? Was it a direct attack? Oh, really?
Yeah, and in fact, the one souvenir I have, which I noticed you don't have, at least I didn't see it, a tail fin of a mortar round, a 60 millimeter mortar round, that when I checked with my friends at EOD, they said, you know, this more likely than not was made in the late 42, 43, 44, Picatinny, Maryland. That was the main place where they made these things. Was shipped to the Pacific for, you know, the Marines probably, and then we didn't use it. We gave it to the French. The French lost it to the Viet Minh, and now 20 years later, we got it back.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
So I have this tail fin, and I use that as a paperweight.
Any other Jake? Any other experiences while you were in combat zone in Vietnam? Any other experiences that really had made a big impression on you? Had an impression?
Yeah.
I'm all ears.
Well, we had 30 sentry dogs, and I noticed you've got some sentry dog stuff out here. And the Air Force protocol is, well, whatever your perimeter is, all right, however many dogs you have, divide the perimeter by the number of dogs, and that's the post. And so that's how we had them. And this takes place after the perimeter fence is built. So now I've got time on my hands, and I'm sitting there. And one of the last things that I had coursework at Georgia Tech was a course called Signal Detection Theory. And signal detection theory, you can think of a signal detection device as there are 4 possible outcomes. It can detect something, and that would be a hit. It can think it detects something, but it isn't, and that's a false alarm. It can fail to detect something that happens, and that would be a miss. Or it could be nothing, and you see nothing. So there's 4 possibilities: false alarm, hit, miss, and null. And it describes really almost any kind of signal detection device you might think of.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also analyze it mathematically using normal distribution curves and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so now I'm sitting here, and I've got 30 sentry dogs, and they go out every night, and periodically the dog will alert. So, dog, signal detection. And so I start looking at the the alert reports, and then I realized that the dog has 3 ways of alerting. It can see something, it can hear something, it can smell something. Well, German Shepherds have poor eyesight, and at night it's even more poor. So they don't see much, but they've pretty good hearing, much better than you or I. But their smell is fantastic. All right, and so armed with that, and I'm looking at the reports, some of which are false alarms, some of which are hits, and so now, signal detection. So I start doing a signal detection theory analysis, and it occurs to me that I can pinpoint virtually all of the false alarms are coming on the downwind side of the base. Virtually all of the hits are coming on the upwind side of the base. Why is that? Well, the downwind sides, they're actually alerting on something that's happening inside the base, because they're either hearing it or more likely they're smelling it.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, well, then why don't I put dogs on the upwind side and humans on the downwind side? So I do that. And all of a sudden, our hit rate goes up and our false alarm rate goes down. So I write it up as a little report. But shortly after that, this outfit from SRI, Stanford Research Institute, they had gotten this sweetheart contract from DOD, something called CREDS, Counter Research something insurgency defense. It was defense concepts, counterinsurgency defense concepts in a combat zone.
Mm-hmm.
And they were flying, and they had this beach bonanza. They were flying all around on what I think was just a gollywag.
Yeah.
And they hear, boy, their eyes lit up. Here's somebody actually doing research. We can somehow justify our existence.
Yeah.
And so they invite me. So, well, when you come back, there's going to be a CREDS conference, and we would like you to come and present your paper. I said, okay, fine, great. So I get back, and I've had it with Air Police. And so I tell this colonel in personnel at the Pentagon, I want to get out. He says, well, why do you want to get out? And I said, well, let me tell you, because I kept trying to go to graduate school. And, I reapplied for graduate school while I was in Vietnam, and the paperwork disappeared. It never got wherever it was supposed to go. And so I decided it's time to part company. Well, then, so he says, all right, well, let me see. And so he comes me, he says, well, how would you like to be a personnel subsystems officer? I said, what is that? And it turns out personnel subsystems officer looks at proposed weapon systems from a human factors perspective to say, how well designed is it? Is the manpower requirements and skill requirements commensurate with what we have in the Air Force already? And if not, what kinds of training would we need to do? And by the way, is there something we could modify in the design of the hardware or the system to make it more compatible? So,
More compatible, Jake, can I, from a layman's point, make it user-friendly?
yeah,
That's it.
exactly. That's the man-machine systems, user-friendly, all the way up. And so my eyes lit up. Sure, yeah, great, I'll do that. It meant extending. Well, so now the conference comes around, and I'm supposed to go give this paper. All of a sudden, I can't give the paper because the paper is classified confidential. And the security system is based on a need to know. Okay, and as a personnel subsystems officer, I have no need to know what I wrote. And so I can't legally go and give a paper based on a paper that I did where I have no need to know what I did.
Oh my gosh. You can't make this stuff up.
Yeah, and what the? So the colonel who was organized says, just come. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. Well, in the midst of all of that, that was the Arab-Israeli
67.
67
Mm-hmm.
explosion.
7 days.
And so the conference got canceled and I never got a chance to give it. Yeah. But, so now I'm off to Chanute Technical Training Center, assigned to Air Force Systems Command, TDY with Air Force Training Command. because now I'm the liaison between Systems Command and Training Command to make sure that, you know, the new weapon systems are commensurate with and so forth. And then it becomes abundantly clear that, you know, all these things I'm working on are just pie in the sky, because we aren't acquiring any new weapon systems. All the money is going to Vietnam. And that's when I found, you know, these guys are never going to send me to graduate school. So I said, I'm out of here.
Jacob, my older son worked on state-of-the-art defense, and there's a advanced, it's cutting edge, where they do stuff that you're talking about. Advanced something systems, and it sounds like that back in the day,
Yeah.
it probably came about somewhat after, but I can't think of the title of the acronym, but he actually did a contract,
Yeah.
did a grant. They had a grant, yeah. So that was the kind of thing, but it with Vietnam, it didn't. They weren't
No.
interested.
Well, one of the ironies now is, a few years ago, I went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the Air Force Museum. And I've been there several times, but this most recent time, they have a whole new hangar or corridor with wings, and there's one whole wing devoted to base defense concepts in Vietnam. And I'm like, wow, that's all the stuff that I did. Yeah.
I think you offered too much, you know, as far as you know, your mind and what you wanted to do. They just wanted to, you know, fight the Vietnam and at least you know, ideally to go ahead and stop the communists from going south, and they didn't advance weapon systems or even weapon systems that you could, if you would train right, you could have more people use it and use it more effectively. That was, you know, you know. But so go on, Jake.
Well, so after 18 months or so, I think less than 2 years, as a personnel subsystem officer, I'd worked on some really interesting projects, like the reconfiguration of the Minuteman III launch control facility, the re-engineering of B-52s. Then there was a Beaumark, which was a rocket-launched air defense weapon that we were going to, assuming that the Russians launched an air fleet over the North Pole, we were going to send the Beaumark out with a nuclear warhead and blow them all up.
Yeah.
So we worked on one of those. But it became clear to me that, no, they're not going to send me to graduate school, and I'm not sure why, but I just really wanted to go to graduate school.
Yeah.
So I applied to like 6 different graduate schools. There was, and so Renton, Illinois is right up the road from University of Illinois, and they have this fantastic aviation psychology program. So I went down there and interviewed, and we hit it off great. I said, well, this is it, boy, perfect. And I talked to the guy, and we even talked about the research he was doing and how I could fit in and so forth. Okay, done deal. So as I'm leaving, somebody in the graduate studies office said, well, where else have you applied? I said, nowhere. This committee. He says, well, take my advice. Just, you know, apply to some other schools. You know, don't just get one. So I just kind of plucked half a dozen more out of the air and applied. Well, lo and behold, I had accepted in every program except University of Illinois, the one that I thought was a done deal.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And did you? Which one did you pick, Jake?
Well, I picked NC State, but then my wife's father died, and she wanted to, and they live in Watertown, New York, and she wanted to be closer to, and one of the other schools I'd been accepted was SUNY Buffalo, State University of New York at Buffalo. So I called Buffalo, could I still get in? Yes. So I called NC State, said, sorry, not coming. So we went to SUNY Buffalo.
SUNY Buffalo was the MIT of New York, right?
Yeah.
At the time? Yeah.
Yeah. So with the GI Bill, I had 36 months of GI Bill, and I used 33 of the 36. I got my master's and my PhD because I was, contrary to as an undergrad, a little unfocused, I was totally focused. Plus I was married and I had a child.
Well, at least I mean, that was probably the biggest thing you got, right? You had to going through that, through your service. I mean, it didn't go as you thought it should go, but at least you...
No, but I don't have any regrets. I mean, so many of those experiences were very positive, very valuable. I mean, I really got a sense of, if you want to do something, do it. You do it yourself. Don't rely on others. And it gave me a sense of significance. Some things are more important than other things. So that, when something doesn't go quite, well, it's not the worst thing that can happen.
And what you did, Jake, with that Shah or whatever, negotiating with the Army, you had to do, it said that basically you learned that you might have to do that throughout your life. You have to go, it's going to be cliche, but outside the box. It's the only way to do it. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Jake, did you make any friendships or camaraderie when you were in?
Not really.
Okay.
No.
Was there any particular humorous or unusual events that you remember?
Well, I've told you a couple of them.
Okay.
So many of my, I think, are in the big picture things hilarious, just crazy, sort of thing that if you weren't there, you'd find it hard to believe.
Oh, it sounded like it'd make a good movie.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And you said, I remember, it's like MASH and...
Catch-22.
It's...
Yeah.
How long did you have altogether, Jake? How long were you in altogether on active?
7 years.
7 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you remember the day that you walked out? Did you have a certain feeling?
I do.
I finally got him to laugh. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, okay. I wanted to take my medical records with me. So I go to the hospital because, in those days, if you had an appointment, you had to go to medical records, get your medical records, and carry them with you to your appointment.
Even as an officer.
Yeah. So I go in and I say, I want my records. And I guess I have to tell you how I got out. Okay, because I kept taking college courses. I took psych courses, calculus courses, history courses, and so forth. Well, every time you take a course, if that course is like 12 weeks long, you owe the military some multiple of that time. Like a 12-week course, okay, well, you owe them 36 weeks or something. So in July, I think it was June or July of '69, I decided, I've had it. I want to get out.
You've been in 3 years. You've been in 3 years.
No, I'd been in 6 years.
6 years, okay.
Almost, roughly 6 years, 7 years, 6, 7 years. And, well, okay, well, I've told you, I can't tell right from left, okay? And I hate marching. So I would go to great lengths to get out of marching, even in ROTC. I decided, if I was in the band, I didn't have to march on Thursdays. And on Saturdays, when they had the review, I would just march on, stop, and then we would play, and then we would march off. So there's this plastic spray called Krylon that you can spray on anything. And so in order to make sure my shoes were shiny, I put Krylon on them. Well, I have no musical talent. So I'm sure, how about cymbals? So I took up cymbals. I mean, anybody can play cymbals, I didn't know there's actually music for cymbals. And so my crowning event was marching on the field. Well, prior to that, okay, everything has to be shined. And so I'm sitting in my dorm room and I'm polishing my cymbals, and I realize, well, I can't get to all of it. There's this leather handles that are in the way. So I untie them so I can make everything nice and shiny. And then I realize, that's a very complicated knot. I don't know. So well, what the hell? Anything that's bigger than the hole. So I just knotted, there's 4 strands. I knotted all together. And we're marching on to the parade ground. And we're playing John Philip Sousa, Stars and Stripes Forever. Dun, 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 dun. And I go, bam! And son of a gun, the cymbal took off.
Oh my God!
It sailed. I couldn't believe it. I'm looking, and it went over everybody's head, landed on the asphalt on its edge, and rolled and rolled and rolled. One cymbal.
Well, your career as a musician, was that?
Well, I got some demerits, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I tried the same stunt at OTS, but it didn't work. So I was playing drums. I figured anybody.
Is that OC for officer candidate school?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But that, I was trying to get out of it. But yeah.
Yeah.
So my musical career was short.
Well, I tell you, I had some hard times in boot camp, and I had some demerits for various reasons. And one of the ways that I got back to, kind of alleviated some of the bad feeling is I volunteered to be in a choir. I never sang in a choir, so I can relate to that.
Yeah. Yeah, so now we can, how am I going to get out of the Air Force? Because I still owe them like 3 or 4 years of time. And so I requested an early out. No, can't have it. Then I noticed, son of a gun, they are riffing. The riff is RIF, reduction in force. And if you have 18 and a half years, they have to allow you the last 18 months. So they were riffing majors who had 18 years and 3 months because they had too many officers. And so I'm thinking, how unfair is this? Here, I'm a captain. I want to get out, and they won't let me out, which I'm wandering all over. But you talk about funny episodes. At Chanute Technical Training Center, when I first got there, I got chosen as a squadron officer. And so it's sort of a make-believe sort of thing, because you got thousands of enlisted men there and very few officers. So they have to go to permanent party-based personnel. Strictly speaking, I wasn't. I was there TDY from Systems Command. But anyhow, so I got tagged, and and so this major that I worked for, Ernie Smith, says, well, you only do it once, because we only have parades once a month, and we only have it when the weather is nice. So the odds are you'll never have to do this again. Well, shortly thereafter, we got a new base commander who was a SAC officer, and he says, by God, we're going to have parades, and we're going to have parades rain or shine, and we're going to have them every week, not every month. So all of a sudden now I'm getting called up, and I hate it. So as a former air police officer, I knew that there was a regulation for everything. So I go back and say, what's the regulation for this marching? And it's the furtherance and continuation of military bearing. How to march, how to wear a uniform, how to salute, and so forth. And then I noticed there were 3 categories of officers that didn't march. The chaplains didn't march, the staff judge advocates didn't march, and the medics didn't march. And by and large, those 3 were the sloppiest looking officers you ever saw, So I'm thinking, if anybody needs to march, they ought to march. So I go to see the colonel, and in the meantime, I'm a royal pain in the ass for this guy. He knows me. I'm a troublemaker. So I go in and click the heels permission to speak, sir. Yes, Captain Shealy, what is it now? And I said, well, I don't want to march in the parades. And he just his eyes rolling. Well, none of us probably really want to, but, you know, we all have to. And I said, well, sir, you know, you've just put your finger on what I see as the real problem. Not everybody marches. He says, what do you mean not everyone marches? I said, well, staff judge advocates, they don't march. Medics, they don't march. The chaplains, they don't march. And I said, you know, if anybody needs military training, it's those guys. So if they don't have to march, I don't think I should have to march. Get out of here. So I go back. Ernie says, how'd it go? I said, I thought it went very well. So Thursday, the tech sergeant from First Shirt calls up and gives me a parade or something. He says, no, I'm not marching. He says, oh, you're going TDY? I said, no, I'm not going TDY. Oh, you're going on leave? No, I'm not going to leave. And that kind of exhausts the possibilities, and so he's sitting there, tech sergeant, talking to captain. Well, thank you very much, sir. Hangs up. So the parade comes on Saturday and goes, and I don't go. So Monday, I'm expecting a call. Nothing. Tuesday, nothing. Wednesday, nothing. I can't stand it. So I go down to the orderly, and, you know, this text, oh, Captain Shealy, you're here. I says, yes. Well, how did you enjoy your TDY or your leave? I don't, well, geez, Major Smith called and said you were going to be on leave or whatever. I said, no. You know, and I have no plans to in the future either. Well, I never got another call to march, you know. So now we fast forward. Okay, it's time to get out of this outfit. How do I get out of this outfit? Well, officers are not supposed to wear jewelry. Well, officers are supposed to wear V-neck T-shirts, not scoops.
Not a crew.
Not a crew. And they're not supposed to. So I started wearing a scoop neck T-shirt. I started wearing a little gold cross, which you're not supposed to do. I started letting my sideburns grow, which you're not supposed to do. I started carrying an umbrella, which I don't know why, but the tradition is officers do not carry umbrellas. and then the coup de grace was to carry a briefcase in my right hand. So I'd be marching along as a captain, and this major would go on. Just keep walking. So after those episodes, I finally got, okay, you can go.
So you decided, Jake, I'm not conforming anymore.
Well, I knew, you know, okay, there's the Uniform Code of Military Justice, UCMJ, and officers cannot get an Article 15. Okay, you have to give them a court-martial or else, you know. And so I figured all these things that I'm doing would be hard for them to give me a court-martial for failing to salute.
Right.
But I'm just making myself a royal pain.
And it worked.
And it worked.
That's good.
So I got out.
That's good. Well, I mean, you served. I mean, you did. You made a contribution, and it's just.
I thought so.
Yeah, but you said this is okay. This is I need to
It's
end
BS.
this. Yeah,
Yep.
BS, and I need to go. But
Yep.
but you did make a contribution. So you went from you left the Jake, and where did you, once you left you got your orders.
Yeah.
Where did you go? Did you?
Well, okay. I went to get my medical records, but they caught me, so I didn't get to take them. All right, I went to SUNY Buffalo to grad school.
Oh, okay.
So I got my master's and my PhD in human factors engineering.
Jake, how did you have a hard time readjusting to civilian life?
No.
No.
No, well, the one thing we were told, don't wear your uniform off base.
Okay.
Because that's when they
You
were
know.
calling you baby killers and all that other nonsense.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Pissed me off.
Yeah, yeah, and so people who say thank you for your service, frankly, even to this day, it kind of rings hollow.
Jake, then we'll get into the reflections, and then this is to have a few more questions. Did military service, in what ways did your service, the 7 years, how did it affect your life? Now, I mean, unfortunately, tragically, you know, being exposed, like you said, but any other aspects did it affect your life? And I'm hoping that you had that there was some benefit, you know, some
Oh,
benefit.
very, very much so. I mean, when I am in a situation, I generally think, you know, is there some silver lining here? And I tend to see the silver linings, and I appreciate, you know, the learning experience. And I would say it certainly matured me, gave me a sense of confidence that I could do things, and gave me a sense of proportion, context.
Context and
You know.
you know, what's important, what's not, what should come
Exactly.
first, and that type of thing.
Yeah, it's really hard for anybody to really get me upset, because I look at it as, it's not that important. Let it go.
Thanks, Jake. Now, how did the military service, in that you were actually in combat, did the military service impact your feelings about war?
Yes,
And in what way, Jake?
war should be an absolute last resort. And it's made me very anti-gun. Having seen firsthand up close what guns do, the idea that this country has 400 million guns and only 330 people is insane.
Yeah.
If it was up to me, no one would have a gun.
Thank you, Jake. And the last of the reflections, what message would you like to give to your, grandsons and granddaughters and, generations, as far as what message would you like to leave about, as far as this experience you had, the military experience? I mean,
Well, I think it would be useful for anybody to do some sort of service to his or her country.
okay. Is there what would you like people to know or remember from your story? Anything in particular?
It's the insanity of war.
Okay. And finally, what do you wish more people knew about veterans?
Well, the kind of indirect answer. One of the things that I've done, I've been very fortunate. I've been able to travel the world, and I found it very useful to look at things from somebody else's perspective. So I was, for example, an exchange professor in mainland China in 1987, and went to various Chinese military museums, and it was sort of an unusual privilege to do that, because this was 1987, before lots of Americans went there. And I had this little paper that must have said I was a very important person, and it would open doors. And I was there with my two daughters, one who was in the 7th grade, one who was a college freshman. And we would periodically take trips, and we went up to Yan'an, which, if you know anything about the Chinese Revolution.
My daughter-in-law is Chinese. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So the Long March
Yeah.
ended in Yan'an.
Yeah.
And they have this enormous museum there. It's honest to God, it's about the size of the Pentagon. It's
That
just
big.
a big open square, and it's called the Museum of the Revolution. And you go in it, and fully, I'd say 2/3 of it in 1987 were devoted to what they called the War of the Japanese Occupation. And I'm thinking, War of the Japanese? Oh,
Yeah.
you mean World War II. And what's interesting, their perspective, this was the communist perspective, was that, yeah, the U.S. played a minor role in this whole thing, but the reason the Japanese were defeated was because of the Chinese. And our tour guide was a PLA veteran, People's Liberation Army veteran. And so after the tour, we're sitting having beer and food and so forth, and reflecting on, I was asking about his experience, and then it came out that, I had been in Vietnam, and so he was sort of laughing, and we were both laughing at the Russians, because 1987 was when they were hung up in Afghanistan. And so he says, he infers, that Afghanistan for the Russians is like Vietnam was for Americans. I said, yeah, I think you're right. And then we start talking about the Korean War, which he had been in, and his view was that the Chinese lost and that we won. And I said, really? I said, our view is almost the opposite. I said, because we would, mow you guys down, and you just kept coming. And his view, when he was on the other side, was, yeah, you would mow us down, and it looked like no matter how many of us in, you were going to kill us all. And then he talked about, when they were getting ready to go, they had these indoctrination sort of morale building lectures from the Chinese communists that essentially said, you've heard this phrase, paper tigers. It says, the Americans are paper tigers. It's true they have superior weapons, but they lack the will to use them. And he said, wow. In my experience, that's absolutely not true.
That's true, yeah.
And he said, we felt at that point that Mao Zedong had feet of clay. That, and that was their view. I found it fascinating.
That we essentially we're saying that we don't have the will to.
We don't have the will to use those weapons.
Yeah.
And I came to appreciate the poor grunts, and I felt the same way about the NVA. These guys. And I came to the impression that really Vietnam was as much as anything a nationalist war. That
the Vietnam Nationalist War.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ho Chi Minh, for example, he attended the 1919 Paris Versailles Treaty, and was expecting to get recognized, that Vietnam would be recognized as an independent country. And Wilson had these 12 points, one of which was, we are anti-colonialists. And so he didn't, he wanted to be free of the colonials, and we turned him down. World War II, we supported him through OSS because he helped us extract, and there was this implied promise that, come the end of the war, we will support you as a country. And then we got into this back and forth with the French, and in order to keep France in NATO, we allowed them to have Indochina back. So Ho Chi Minh, granted he was a communist, but the reason he became communist in 1921 was nobody else would have anything to do with it.
No, Jake, the whole idea.
So he went to Moscow.
You still take.
Yeah, as far as taking it to, looking back, lessons learned, the whole idea was that the Vietnamese wanted self-determination.
Exactly.
And neither the French wouldn't do it, we wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And, so.
Precisely, yeah. I think so. So I had a great appreciation for the plight of especially the enlisted personnel. They're just recruited. They don't have a dog in this fight. They're just told what to do. And I went to Normandy several years ago. And in addition to going to the American cemetery, I went to the German cemetery. And if you haven't been to the German cemetery, I would highly encourage it.
I've been to the American. But
Yeah.
not the
Yeah,
German.
I've been to American.
It's so somber.
Is it nearby?
Yeah,
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 it's
it's-
down the road or something.
just down the road.
Yeah.
Whereas, the American cemetery, there are white crosses and
Yeah.
stars of David and precise rows, lines, and everything. The German cemetery, they're in rows and columns, but they are basalt, and they're black, and they're ground level. There are very few stones that rise above. And you look at them, and you see that the vast majority of the folks buried there are either very young or very old,
Yeah.
you know, and so many of them are just unknown.
This gives you
Just
a sake of a sense of
Yeah.
perception or perspective, a sense of perception or perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, and hardly, I'm certain, hardly any of those were Nazi members.
Yeah.
They were just, you know, told, you're going.
Which brings us back to the way that we were viewed at the end of the Vietnam War. I mean, it was a misperception that they thought that the average soldier or sailor had, you know, they had nothing to do with going and carrying out, you know, making war or prosecuting war. They had nothing to do with it.
Yeah,
Yeah. So.
yeah.
All right. At this time, I'd like to thank Jake for giving us his story, and